to talk about what's new in the April 2022 update of Azure Lab Services. If you don't know what Azure Lab Services is, this is not the presentation for you. Go and watch another presentation called Tutorial that is on our blog as well. This one is just the difference between the existing version of Azure Lab Services and the April 2022 update. So let's start. Those are all the features in one slide. You can see that we divide our audience typically into three personas: the IT or the administrators, the educators, and the students. And we have new features for each one of those. So let's start with the administrators. And this is again a list of all the features for them. So let's go one by one. First, there is a new concept of a lab plan that replaces the lab account. These two concepts are rather similar in many ways, but as well slightly different. First of all, a lab plan is more like a recipe to create labs. It's not a container for labs as the lab account was. So if you delete a lab plan, you are not going to delete all the labs, for example. And this is the first of a number of features which form a bit of a theme in the April in the April release, which is the integration, the more close integration of Azure Lab Services with Azure in general. And lab plans are the start of that. And so if you want to use the new feature in the April 2022 release, then create a lab plan, and from there go and create your labs so that you are sure you are going to use the new features. If you create a lab account, then you're still going to use the previous version. So let's take a look at what those new features are. First of all, data residencies. So all the resources, you can define in which region to create all the resources, and they will live there. There is no possibility for those resources to live somewhere else, which is important for many universities. The next one is advanced networking. So this is the V1 kind of picture of how things were. A lab and all the VMs in the lab are created in a subscription which is owned by Microsoft. And there is you can create a peering relationship between the subnet inside the Microsoft subscription and a subnet in your own owned subscription. And so by doing so, the VMs can communicate with resources that are in your own subnet. And that works rather well. It's very simple, but there are a few scenarios where that is not flexible enough. And this is why in V2, in the April update, we have created this new advanced networking feature. And in this new world, you can decide to have the network-related resources related to your lab plans to live inside your own subnet, a subnet that you create. So the load balancer, it's all created in your own subnet that you provide. There is no peering relationship anymore, which makes a lot of stuff work because things are on your subnet now. At the same time, it's slightly more complicated to create because you have to do things on your own. You have to create the subnet, set up the security group, so on and so forth. But we have documentation on how to do all of that. But it does enable more scenarios. Okay, so that's a kind of more detailed description of what I just kind of told you, I think. So the scenarios that are enabled, is the older one on the left. Especially a lot of stuff becomes simpler, like sharing files, for example, or having students directly connecting to the lab, or having two labs talk to each other, which was very hard to do kind of in the past. There are some issues, or yeah, I don't know if we ever solve them, maybe we will, but they kind of their feature of the thing. So, well, the firewall probably we are going to support at some point. Yeah, but yeah, in essence, if you mess around with the virtual network or with the subnet, then the lab will stop working. So don't do that. Okay. One of the requests from many universities, or one of the concerns, at least with using the product, was that our roles were too coarse-grained. I mean, we just had pretty much one role, or maybe two, the one of lab creator, which and the guy could do, or the girl could do everything to the labs. Now we have more granularity around those roles. And they can. We have lab contributors, lab operator, lab assistant, and they all have different set of permissions. And hopefully, we have captured all the possibilities here, or most of the possibilities, the most requested ones. You can still create your own role if you don't, if those don't work for you. And these huge metrics that you have to memorize in 3 seconds describes all the permission and all the different roles that we have. Okay, cost tracking. It is now more granular. As I said, now things are more proper Azure resources. So the VMs, you can track things on a VM by VM basis. And so that you can see how much a VM has consumed. We also apply tags to all the resources related to a lab plan, so that even if you don't apply your own tag, which you can do, you still can go back and get proper reports on your consumption. One thing that you have to remember, this is very important, in the past, we had situations where people created labs, and then at the time of running them, there were no core available in the region. And so there were a few problems with that. So what we do now is that we require upfront for you to ask, before you run a class, to ask for how many VMs you need, the size, and the region you want them to, so that we are sure, you are sure and we are sure, that when the time comes to run the class, all the cores are available and there are not bad surprises at that point. So remember to do that. There is a button in the upper part of the lab plan screen where you can click and request the capacity for your class. Automation. Even in V1, we had the PowerShell SDK and perhaps a C# as well. But with the new release, now you can also deploy things as ARM templates, because they are indeed just Azure resources. Moreover, we have moved the PowerShell SDK module inside the Azure proper module, so you don't have a separate installation. If you're using Azure in PowerShell, it's already there for you. Also, we have created a GitHub repo, which contains a lot of resources. First of all, it contains PowerShell scripts to create the class types that are in the documentation. But also, it has bulk deployment scripts, which we have created by working with customers who had scaled out their usage of the service to very large levels. And when you do that, you have to be a bit more careful, because sometimes some creation might fail or something like that might happen, and you need to recover from that. And so the bulk deployment scripts, they have all the logic in them to kind of cover those scenarios. And again, as I always say, if you can do something through the UI, then there is a way to do it through the script. And if you're doing a large-scale deployment, you probably want to script it. You don't want to, hitting UI buttons all day. All right, so that was for the IT administrator. The educator, the person who kind of create labs and manages labs, there are many features for him or her as well. First of all, the Canvas integration. Canvas is a very widely used LMS, and now you can associate a lab with a course, a Canvas course, and the roster will be kept in sync so that if you add new students to the course, automatically they get a VM in the lab. And so that all works, and from Canvas you can then access your VM. So that works well. And this is another important kind of upgrade. Everything is faster by quite a bit in some cases, perhaps in most cases. Creation, lab creation, publishing, VM start, which was a point of a few issues in the past. Sometimes it will go a bit too long. Now all of those things are much faster, as you can kind of see the numbers here. The auto shutdown experience, we have now integrated inside the VM our own agent, so that we have more control on the shutdown experience. First of all, it works both for Windows and Linux because the agent works in both cases, and that was not the case before. And moreover, it is more reliable, and we have more control on the definition of idle. Is idle user absence? Is resource usage like disk or CPU? And you can select what do you mean by idle, because we have an agent that is kind of looking at the machine and can check those things. And also, finally, you can now stop the OS, and we can shut down the machine from Azure. But it takes a bit more time for us to figure out that the OS was shut down, but we can now do it. Also, what we have noticed is that many universities create their own image, and then when they go and create the labs, they really don't need this multi-step process that we provide. So you can create a lab which creates a template VM. You can then connect to the template VM, install your own programs, and then publish the lab. But if you already have an image which has all your programs, then you don't need to connect to the template VM. And you don't even need to create a template VM in that case. And so we do support that now. There is a checkbox, and that makes the creation of labs faster, and the lab manager has no option to accidentally start the template VM. So it's kind of a logical things for us to do. And you also now can create non-admin users for your students. The schedule, those are things, how the schedule works. In general, a lot of these things were already there, but now they are, more reliable in their kind of workings. And we removed the kind of start-only schedule type. You can still have an event that is stop-only. So, for example, on my VMs, I put at 11 in the night a stop-only event, because I kind of remember. So the system remembers to shut them down if I forget. But the start-only event was a bit problematic because people wouldn't realize it and set it for a day, and then every day the VM will start, and they will find themselves paying a lot of money at the end of the month. And so to avoid this common failure scenario, we removed the event completely. Hopefully you don't miss it. Okay, we have refreshed the SKUs for the VMs. You can see the kind of the previous one and the new one. There are a few differences in there, but mostly they are rather similar, but they are the newest one. Things that are unchanged on the left. as you kind of, as you would expect. All sizes are SSD, and with premium disk for nested virtualization and standard for the other, and GPUs available in more regions if you ask for them. Remember to ask for them before you run your class by hitting the button to request more core. From a student perspective, you can kind of, there were situations in the past when kind of the student couldn't connect through RDP to their VM. And what we used to do was to move the VM to a new Azure host. So shut it down, take the disk, put it on a new Azure host, and things magically worked. So now the student himself or herself can go and do the same thing by clicking on the appropriate button on their VM, and the instructor as well can perform this operation. It's a bit of a brute force way to solve a problem, but if it works, now you can do it yourself instead of asking for a support for us to do it. Active Directory integration, you can now specify that a lab is tied to an Active Directory group, so that when you add new users to the group, they will be automatically added to the lab. And this is what, the way it already works in Microsoft Teams and Canvas, but now it works even for just an Active Directory group. And again, notice that the VMs are not joined to that Active Directory group. So the student cannot log to a VM using their Azure Active Directory login. They still have to use the user and password that you have specified or they have specified for the VM. All right, a few things that people have asked. You can start using it right now. You just create a lab plan and go create a lab and you're done. We recommend, because it's still a preview, it's not a official version yet, that you just run small classes with friendly professors. We are there to support you, so we are trying to help, but this is not yet production. It's a preview at this point. It's a public preview. You need to create new labs. We have no facilities to upgrade the old labs to the new one. There are a few things that can make your life easier, like using the same compute gallery with your image and then create the new lab with the image, as it says, I think there, and you can still reuse your license server, but you do have to create a new lab to use the new feature, starting from the lab plan. And the Azure PowerShell module is indeed already there. Okay, that's all. This is all that is new in this release, and thank you very much.